Let's get one thing straight. I'm not a good person. Good people, when they get a miraculous do-over in life, probably focus on saving the whales or inventing a cure for something. They don't spend 10 years meticulously plotting the systematic destruction of everyone who wronged them. But then again, good people don't usually end up at the bottom of a ravine with drugged wine in their system and the ghost of their fiancé's face watching from a distant window. In my first life, I gave them everything. I gave Adrian Volkov the foundational algorithm that launched his tech empire. I gave his company, Volkov Tech, a decade of my life, my ideas, my weekends. I gave my family my unwavering loyalty, even when they looked at me with disappointment, wondering why I couldn't be softer, sweeter, more like her. And I gave Lila Reed my trust, believing she was the fragile, loving best friend she pretended to be. They took it all, and when they were done, they chose her. Adrian chose to love Lila, my family chose to adore Lila, and together, they chose to let me be erased. The tampered brakes on my car were just a formality. The real cause of death was betrayal. When I woke up screaming in my university dorm room, 10 years in the past, the grief was a tidal wave. But beneath the grief was a foundation of pure, unadulterated ice. I cried for 3 days. Then I dried my tears, opened a spreadsheet, and started planning. They wanted to choose her? Fine. This time, I'd be the one handing her to them on a silver platter. And while they were all distracted by the prize, I'd be walking away with the entire damn kingdom. The champagne tasted like victory. 10 years. It had been 10 years to the day since I'd woken up in that secondhand dorm bed, and now I was standing in the glittering heart of my own meticulously crafted timeline. The grand ballroom of the Empyrean Hotel was packed with Silicon Valley's finest, all gathered for the 10th anniversary gala of Volkov Tech, my masterpiece of a trap. "You look breathtaking, Alara," my mother whispered, clutching my arm. Her eyes, however, darted over my shoulder. "Oh, look, there's Lila. Doesn't she look just like an angel?" I glanced over. Lila was a vision in white, a stark contrast to my severe blood-red gown. She was surrounded by a small crowd of admirers, batting her eyelashes and looking adorably overwhelmed. An angel indeed, a fallen one. "She does," I said, my voice perfectly even. I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles fizzing on my tongue. Right on schedule, the lights dimmed. A single spotlight hit the stage, illuminating Adrian. My fiancé. He was handsome, charismatic, a predator in a bespoke suit. He tapped the microphone, that familiar, charming smile plastered on his face. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice smooth as velvet. 10 years ago, Volkov Tech was just a dream. A dream I shared with a remarkable partner. He looked directly at me, and a ripple of awe went through the audience. I held his gaze, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum. Keep going. To build something like this, it takes more than a partner. It takes a soulmate. Someone who sees you, who understands the very core of you. Here it comes. The big moment. In my first life, this speech ended with my name. This time, I knew better. He took a deep breath, his eyes shining with unshed theatrical tears. Then, he turned and walked right past me. The air sucked out of the room. The silence was a physical thing, thick and heavy. He walked right up to Lila, whose hands flew to her mouth in a perfect pantomime of shock. He knelt, pulling a velvet box from his pocket. The diamond inside was obnoxiously large, a rock I'd seen the designs for in his laptop just last week. "Lila Reed," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Will you make me the happiest man alive? Will you marry me?" The crowd gasped as one. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on me, a wave of pity and morbid curiosity. My mother let go of my arm like I was suddenly contagious. My father was staring at his shoes. My brother just looked confused. Perfect. All of them, playing their parts without a single missed cue. Lila burst into tears, nodding frantically. "Yes! Oh, Adrian, yes!" As he slid the ring onto her finger, I let my own mask fall. I manufactured a tremor in my hand, causing my champagne flute to slip and shatter on the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot. Everyone turned to me. I let a single perfect tear trace a path down my cheek. I looked at Adrian, my lips parted in a silent question. "How could you?" I whispered, just loud enough for those closest to me to hear. Then, with the grace of a dying swan, I let my knees buckle and collapsed sideways, fainting directly into the arms of a terrified-looking waiter I'd tipped $200 an hour before. The last thing I saw before I closed my eyes was the flash of raw panic on Adrian's face. Not for me, but for the beautiful, perfect narrative he'd just so thoroughly ruined. Checkmate, darling, and the game has only just begun. The scent of antiseptic and lilies always made me laugh. It was the signature scent of performative guilt. I woke up in a ridiculously opulent private hospital suite that I had booked under a pseudonym a month ago. My family was huddled in the corner, looking grim. "Alara, honey," my mother started, stepping forward. "We are so sorry. We had no idea." I blinked slowly, feigning disorientation. Where am I?" "You're at St. Jude's," my father mumbled. "You fainted. Adrian is in the waiting room. He's a mess." "I don't want to see him," I whispered, my voice a fragile thread. "Or any of you. Please, just go." The relief on their faces was palpable. They practically tripped over each other to get out the door, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume and cheap apologies in their wake. The moment the door clicked shut, my entire demeanor shifted. I sat up, pulled my laptop from the overnight bag I'd stashed in the closet, and got to work. My fingers flew across the keyboard. It was time to tip the first domino. Adrian's new baby, the project that was supposed to cement Volkov Tech as an industry titan for the next decade, was a software suite called Prometheus. It was brilliant, revolutionary, and, as I knew from a past life, deeply flawed. In my first go-around, I'd found the critical security flaw and created the patch that saved the launch. Adrian had presented my work as his own. This time, there would be no patch. I opened an encrypted browser and logged into a secure drop point I'd set up with Natasha Roman, a journalist whose career was built on taking down corporate giants. Her ambition was a weapon I'd been sharpening for years, from Nix to and Roman. Subject: a crack in the God machine. Miss Roman, look into Volkov Tech's Prometheus, specifically the data encryption protocols in its core architecture. You'll find they aren't just weak, they're a wide-open door. An interested party could exploit it to gain root access to any system running the software. I've attached a small proof-of-concept exploit. Imagine what a bad actor could do with this. I imagine your readers would be very interested to know that the new god of the tech world is made of glass. A friend. I hit send. The exploit was real, a little present I'd coded myself. It was just enough to prove the vulnerability without giving away the full method. It would be enough. Natasha was a bloodhound. Next, I opened a different program, one that connected to a series of accounts I'd been building since the day I came back. Every bonus I'd ever received, every stock option I'd exercised, every savvy side investment made with the benefit of foreknowledge, it had all been slowly accumulating. With a series of keystrokes, I initiated the final transfer. Millions of dollars liquidated and funneled through a dizzying maze of shell corporations and cryptocurrency tumblers, finally settling in a secure, untraceable portfolio in the Cayman Islands. The owner of the account? A newly registered anonymous entity. Its name was Nix. I shut the laptop, leaned back against the starched pillows, and turned on the TV. Let them think I was the broken woman. Let them pity me. While they were busy with their drama, I was starting a war. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room hummed, a low, monotonous drone that vibrated in my bones. It was the same sound I remembered from my first life. Not from a hospital, but from the morgue. I hadn't been a visitor. As I stared at the blank TV screen, the reflection wasn't the woman in the hospital bed, but the ghost I used to be. The memory hit me, sharp and unwelcome, a shard of glass in my soul, and it wasn't a grand ballroom then. It was our apartment, the one I had decorated. Adrian hadn't proposed to Lila. He'd just told me he was in love with her. It was quiet, pathetic, and so much more painful. "I'm sorry, Alara," he'd said, not looking at me. He was packing a suitcase. "It just happened. Lila, she needs me." "Needs you?" I'd scoffed, the wine he'd poured me making my head feel fuzzy. "She's the most manipulative person I've ever met, and you need me. This company needs me." "The company will be fine," he said dismissively. You're being hysterical. Hysterical? The classic dismissal. I remembered grabbing my keys, my hands shaking. I'm leaving, I'm going to the office, and I'm taking everything I built with me. His eyes went cold. I don't think so. He stepped in front of the door. Just calm down, finish your wine. But I'd pushed past him and stumbled to my car. My head was spinning. The streetlights were blurry halos in the rain. I remember turning the key, the engine roaring to life. I remember the sickening feeling as I pressed the brake pedal at the first stop sign and it went straight to the floor. The last thing I saw was not the tree I was careening towards, but a flicker of movement in our apartment window. It was Adrian, watching. A silhouette against the light, his posture perfectly still. He didn't run to help, he just watched. Waking up 10 years younger was a violent birth. The terror and the pain were so real, I could taste the blood in my mouth. For 3 days, I was that ghost, screaming and crying for a life that had been stolen. But on the 4th day, the ghost receded, leaving behind a woman of ice and fury. The grief was still there, a pilot light of rage in my core. But it was no longer a weakness. It was fuel. I looked away from the reflection in the TV screen, back at the present. The humming of the lights no longer sounded like a morgue. It sounded like a machine, humming to life. My machine. And it was ready to tear their world apart. 2 weeks after my dramatic exit from society, I was recuperating at a private coastal villa, paid for by Nix's burgeoning accounts. In reality, I was in my war room. The media was having a field day with the Adrian Lila Alara triangle, painting me as the tragic victim. It was the perfect cover. No one looks for a predator in the guise of a wounded deer. It was time to deal with Saint Lila. Lila had built her brand on being an artistic prodigy, a gentle soul whose hands created beauty. Her company, Lila Reed Designs, sold everything from bespoke furniture to delicate jewelry, all marketed as her original creations. Her biggest lie was her most profitable one. I'd spent years in this new life tracking down the real artists. A woodworker in Brazil, a metalsmith in Prague, a digital painter in South Korea. Obscure talents she'd discovered on deep dives through the internet, whose work she'd copied with minor alterations. In my first life, I'd had suspicions, but I'd dismissed them. This time, I had receipts. I compiled everything into a single, elegant data packet. Side-by-side comparisons, time-stamped original posts, and the masterstroke, financial records I'd acquired that showed Lila's profits from each stolen design. I didn't leak it to the press. That was too crude. Instead, I sent the packet to the artists themselves. I sent it from Nix, of course, with a simple message. She built an empire on your talent. Here is the proof you need to reclaim it. It took less than 48 hours. The Brazilian woodworker posted a furious side-by-side video that went viral on TikTok. The metalsmith from Prague, an elderly man with a small but fiercely loyal following, wrote a heartbreaking blog post. The Korean artist, who had a massive social media presence, went live on Instagram, tearfully showing her original digital sketches next to Lila's best-selling jewelry line. The hashtag #LilaReedIsAThief started trending worldwide. I watched it unfold from my villa, a glass of Pinot Noir in my hand. Lila's response was a masterclass in panicked incompetence. She released a tearful video statement. I am so hurt by these baseless accusations. She sobbed into her phone's camera, mascara running down her cheeks. Art is about inspiration. I may have been inspired by certain themes, but my work is my own. It comes from my heart. But the proof was too specific, too overwhelming. Her clients, the wealthy socialites who'd paid a premium for originality, started demanding refunds. Her corporate partners began to pull out. I called my brother, a man who considered Lila a sister. It's just awful what they're doing to her. He fumed over the phone. She's a mess, Alara. Adrian is trying to help, but he's so busy with this Prometheus nonsense. Prometheus? I asked, my voice laced with manufactured innocence. What's wrong with Prometheus? Oh, some stupid journalist published a hit piece. The stock is down. It's a nightmare. Dad's furious with Adrian. That's terrible, I said, swirling my wine. You should tell Dad to have faith. Adrian knows what he's doing. In fact, maybe you should buy some more Volkov stock while it's cheap. A sign of family solidarity. You know what, Ilara? That's a great idea, he said, his tone brightening. Show them the Vances have Adrian's back. Thanks for the tip. Anytime, brother, I murmured and hung up. The first domino had hit the second. Lila's reputation was in ashes, and my brother was about to throw his money into a bonfire I had lit myself. It was beautiful. With Lila's implosion serving as the perfect public distraction, Nix went from a whisper to a roar. The stock dip from Natasha Roman's article was my open door. Through my shell corporation, Athena Strategic Holdings, I started buying. At first, it was small blocks of shares, nothing to trigger alarms. But as the negative press around Prometheus grew, Natasha was relentless, publishing follow-ups with anonymous quotes from disgruntled engineers I may or may not have coached. The price kept falling. I bought more and more. Adrian was arrogant. I knew he would be. I watched his interviews on financial news channels, a smirk playing on my lips. This is a coordinated attack by a competitor, he announced, his jaw tight with fury. They're trying to devalue our flagship product through smear tactics so they can acquire us on the cheap. Let me be clear, Volkov Tech is not for sale. He was looking for a rival, a corporate entity with a face. He never once thought to look in his own backyard at the woman he thought was crying into her pillow. Men like Adrian never see the woman they wronged as a threat. They see her as a tragedy. It's their fatal flaw. I used his own playbook against him. I knew the company's weaknesses because I had helped build its strengths. I knew which board members were loyal only to the bottom line, which executives secretly hated each other, and where all the digital skeletons were buried. From my villa, I became a ghost in his machine. I fed anonymous tips to rival factions within the company, hinting that Adrian's mishandling of the Prometheus crisis was grounds for a vote of no confidence. I used old admin backdoors I'd built years ago to access internal servers, subtly corrupting data on quarterly projections and making his team look incompetent. The atmosphere at Volkov Tech, according to my sources, a few key people I'd cultivated for years who owed their careers to me, not Adrian, was pure poison. The hunt for the corporate raider known as Nix was becoming an obsession. Adrian was hemorrhaging money on cybersecurity consultants and private investigators trying to trace Athena Holdings. They hit a wall of Cayman Island firewalls and legal dead ends. He was a shark smelling blood in the water, not realizing it was his own. One evening, I was tracking the market when an encrypted message popped up on my secure terminal. It wasn't from any of my usual contacts. Unknown. Sender, we need to talk. About Nix. About what you're planning. My blood ran cold for the first time in 10 years. I typed a single-word response. Nix. Who is this? The reply came instantly. It was a location. A dingy waterfront bar an hour's drive away and a name that made the floor drop out from under me. Unknown sender, Julian Croft. I'll be waiting. Julian. Adrian's best friend, his COO. The one person who might be able to expose me. The game had just become infinitely more dangerous. The bar smelled of stale beer and desperation. It was the kind of place people went to be invisible. Julian Croft was sitting in a booth in the darkest corner, a glass of whiskey untouched in front of him. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I slid into the booth opposite him, my posture relaxed, my face a neutral mask. This is a long way from the Volkov Tech boardroom, Julian. He didn't flinch. He just stared at me, his eyes dark with a complicated mix of emotions. I ran the numbers, he said, his voice low and hoarse. The trading patterns for Athena Holdings, the timing of the Prometheus leak. It was too perfect, too surgical. It had to be someone who knew the company from the inside out. Someone Adrian had just given every reason in the world to want revenge. He slid a thin file across the sticky table. I know it's you, Ilara. I didn't open the file. I didn't have to. My heart was pounding, a frantic bird against my ribs, but I kept my breathing even. This was it. The moment my perfectly constructed world could shatter. So what now? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. You run to Adrian? Play the hero? Solidify your spot as his number 2? A bitter, humorless laugh escaped his lips. Hero? I'm no hero. He finally looked down at his whiskey, swirling the amber liquid. The last time I stayed silent, you died. I froze. The air crackled. The noise of the bar faded into a dull roar. What did you just say? I don't know how, he said, looking up at me, his face etched with pain and a strange kind of awe. I don't have your memories. I wasn't reborn, but I remember fragments, nightmares, a car crash, a phone call I should have made. The overwhelming feeling that I failed you. For years, it's felt like I'm living with a ghost on my shoulder. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. When Adrian told me he was leaving you for Lila, it was like the nightmare was starting all over again. I felt it in my bones. And this time, I refuse to be a coward. He pushed the file towards me again. I'm not here to stop you, Alara. I'm here to help you. My mind raced, processing the impossible. Julian. The quiet, observant COO, the one person whose decency I'd always respected, was my unwitting ally from another life. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened the file. Inside was not evidence against me. It was evidence against Adrian. Hard, irrefutable proof of something I'd only suspected in my first life. 3 years ago, Volkov Tech had suffered a catastrophic data breach. Millions of users' personal and financial information had been stolen. It was a company-killing event, and Adrian had buried it. There were internal emails, server logs, and a signed NDA from the single security expert he'd paid off. It was the gun, the bullet, and Adrian's fingerprints all over them. He paid the hackers a ransom from an unaudited slush fund, Julian explained. If this gets out, the company is finished, and Adrian goes to prison. I stared at the documents, then back at Julian. This was it. This was the weapon I needed to guarantee a kill shot. I had been planning to bleed them dry. Julian had just handed me a nuclear bomb. Why? I whispered, the single word holding a decade of pain. Because you built that company, not him, Julian said, his voice raw with conviction. He took your genius and twisted it into a monument to his own ego. You deserve to be the one to tear it down, so what's next, boss? A slow smile spread across my face. It was a real one, the first in a very, very long time. What's next, Julian? I said, closing the file. Is that we schedule a board meeting. The Volkov Tech boardroom was a theater of anxiety. Polished mahogany reflected the pale, strained faces of the board members. At the head of the table, Adrian stood tall, attempting to project an aura of control he hadn't possessed in weeks. My father and brother were there, huddled together like sheep in a storm, their faces a mask of grim loyalty. They were about to learn the true cost of backing the wrong horse. I know this has been a trying time, Adrian began, his voice resonating with false confidence. But I have a strategy to fend off this cowardly attack from Athena Holdings. We will fight them, and we will win. Right on cue, the heavy doors at the end of the boardroom swung open. Every head turned. I walked in. The silence was absolute. I wasn't the broken, tragic Alara they remembered. I was dressed in a razor-sharp charcoal suit, my hair pulled back severely, my heels clicking with chilling authority on the marble floor. Behind me were my lawyers, carrying briefcases that might as well have been caskets. I saw the flicker of confusion in Adrian's eyes, quickly replaced by fury. Alara? What is the meaning of this? This is a closed meeting. I ignored him, walking the length of the table until I stood directly opposite him. I placed my briefcase on the table and flicked the latches open. There's no need to search for the head of Athena Holdings, I announced, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the tension. No need to waste any more of the company's money on investigators. I looked directly into Adrian's eyes, letting a small, cold smile touch my lips. Nix is here. A collective gasp went through the room. My father's face went white. My brother looked like he was going to be sick. Adrian stared at me, his carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. That's impossible, he stammered. Is it? My lawyer stepped forward and placed a single bound document in front of each board member. As of 9 a.m. this morning, my client, Miss Alara Vance, through her controlling interest in Athena Holdings and several other entities, now holds 51% of the voting shares of Volkov Tech. This meeting is now at her discretion. Pandemonium! The room erupted in a cacophony of shouted questions and panicked accusations. I let them squabble for a moment before holding up a hand. Instant silence. My first act as majority shareholder, I said, my gaze locked on Adrian, is to call a vote of no confidence in our current CEO. You can't do this, Adrian roared, slamming his fist on the table. I can, I replied coolly. You see, your incompetence in handling this hostile takeover is the least of your problems. I nodded to my lawyer, who dimmed the lights and turned on the main boardroom projector. The first document that flashed on the screen was an email from Adrian, authorizing a multi-million-dollar wire transfer to an untraceable account. The subject line, Prometheus Contingency. The next slide was Julian's file. 3 years ago, this company suffered a data breach of catastrophic proportions, I narrated, my voice echoing in the tomb-like silence. A breach that our CEO decided to illegally cover up, paying a ransom to hackers and burying the evidence to protect his own reputation ahead of a major merger. Slide after slide, the evidence cascaded onto the screen. Server logs, internal memos, the signed NDA. The faces of the board members shifted from shock to horror to icy rage. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at Adrian like he was a disease. He sank into his chair, defeated. The fight was gone. There was nothing left but the pathetic shell of a man who had been utterly and completely outplayed. All those in favor of removing Adrian Volkov as CEO, I asked. Every single hand went up, even my father's. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Adrian was out, his name scrubbed from the company website before he'd even cleared out his desk. The board, terrified of the legal and financial fallout from the data breach, gave me anything I wanted. My first move was to install Julian as interim CEO, a decision met with unanimous approval. He was one of them, yet he was loyal to me, the perfect puppet master. My family tried to approach me after the meeting. Ilara, my father began, his voice shaking. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I looked at him, then at my brother, whose face was green from the realization of how much money he'd lost buying the stock I'd recommended. I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction. Just a profound, empty distance. A mistake is when you take the wrong turn on the freeway, Dad, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. When you consistently and deliberately choose to value a manipulative fraud over your own daughter, that's not a mistake. That's a choice. We love you, my mother whispered, tears in her eyes. No, you don't, I replied softly. You loved the idea of me, the asset I represented. And when a shinier asset came along, you switched your allegiance. Your shares, by the way, are now worthless. Your services to this family are no longer required. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, 3 statues in a lobby of broken dreams. Later that week, I sent one final message. It was to Adrian. There was no text, just a single, untraceable audio file attached. I knew he wouldn't be able to resist listening. It was the audio I had painstakingly recovered from my car's damaged black box from my first life. The quality was poor, full of static, but the words were clear enough. My voice. I'm taking everything I built with me. His voice. I don't think so. Just calm down. Finish your wine. The sound of a car door slamming, the engine starting, and then the unmistakable, terrifying sound of a brake pedal hitting the floor, followed by my own scream. There was no legal recourse for a crime committed in another lifetime. But he would know. He would carry the knowledge of what he did, and the knowledge that I knew, for the rest of his miserable life. That was a prison no court could build. With Julian at the helm, we didn't destroy Volkov Tech. We saved it. We went public with the data breach, but we did it on our own terms. We were transparent, we offered restitution to the affected users, and we fired everyone involved in the cover-up. We took a massive hit, but we survived. We were seen not as criminals, but as a company cleaning house. It was a masterclass in crisis management, orchestrated by me from the shadows. The company was salvaged. The guilty were punished. The board owed me everything. My victory was absolute. 6 months passed, 6 months of rebuilding, restructuring, and rebranding. Volkov Tech became Nexus Dynamics, a name that severed all ties to the past. Under Julian's steady hand and my strategic guidance, the company not only stabilized but began to thrive on its new foundation of transparency and innovation. And then, I did what I had planned all along. At the peak of its recovery, with Nexus Dynamics being hailed as the comeback story of the decade, I sold my controlling interest. I broke up my 51% stake and sold it to a consortium of responsible long-term investment firms, ensuring the company would remain stable and the employees, the ones who were just cogs in Adrian's machine, would be secure. The payout was astronomical, a figure with so many zeros it looked like a joke. More money than my family had ever seen, more than Adrian could ever dream of making again. But that wasn't everything. The final scene of my revenge took place not in a boardroom, but at a sun-drenched cafe overlooking the azure coast of Portugal. I wasn't wearing a power suit. I was in a linen dress, my feet bare in the warm sand under the table. In front of me was a glass of crisp white wine and a well-worn paperback novel. For the first time in this life, or the last, I felt quiet. The roaring engine of vengeance that had powered me for a decade had finally gone silent. There was no spreadsheet open in my mind, no next move to calculate. There was just the sun on my skin and the sound of the waves. My phone buzzed on the table. A secure message. Julian, the Empire is stable. The final transfer just went through. What's next, boss? A genuine smile spread across my face, crinkling the corners of my eyes. It felt foreign and wonderful. I looked out at the endless, sparkling horizon. Freedom. That was it. That was everything. Freedom from their expectations, from their judgment, from the ghost of the girl they had thrown away. I picked up my phone and typed a reply. Alara, a little more of this, then we build our own. I put the phone down, took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine, and breathed in the salty air. They had chosen her, twice now. And in doing so, they had given me the greatest gift of all. They gave me the chance to finally choose myself. And as it turned out, my choice was worth a hell of a lot more.